we're actually going to go out with a big bang because this panel is amazing. I'm very lucky to have with me 4 of the best minds when it comes to working with startups and engaging with them, and some of the biggest brands in the world here. I'm just going to briefly introduce everyone. To my immediate left is Rahul Welde, the Vice President of Media at Unilever. To his left is Ali Parr, Head of International Developer and Platform Relations at Twitter. Nico Chaussin, Head of Digital Innovation at Aviva Las Vegas Digital Garage. And Delu Jackson, Corporate VP of Global Digital Engagement at McDonald's, who is new to the role. We don't have a lot of time, unfortunately, so I'm going to dispense with the platitudes and airy whatevers and just get right into it. Delu, when you think about working with startups at McDonald's, what are the priorities that y'all have in terms of development, engagement, and what's top of mind to you at the company?
Right. For us, it's really focused on looking at the fundamentals of our brand around convenience and fun. If you think about the scale and size of McDonald's and what that means, we have over 36,000 restaurants. We have, we're in 120 plus markets. So everything for us is about the ability to do something with focus and then obviously scale it.
Right.
And so it's across different parts of engagement, from new content types to mobility, Internet of Things, delivery, which are all critical parts of the customer experience and the guest experience when they engage with our brand.
Huh. So, I mean, literally, with the company of the scope of McDonald's, it encompasses everything that is tech right now, basically, is what you're saying. And anything that involves the tech world, y'all are going to have a finger in at some point.
Right.
Ali, looking at the way that Twitter has engaged with startups in the past and some of the things that y'all have done, you've been pretty aggressive at sourcing startups and acquiring companies very early. Like, y'all bought Periscope before it even launched. Yeah. What does that mean? How do you source things like that? And what sort of impact do you see these new companies having on still a very young company like Twitter?
Sure. I mean, I think that the Periscope story is kind of a one-off. Like, acquiring a startup pre-launch is kind of unheard of and is the dream story from the startup's point of view, right? But more typically, we spend a lot of the time on the ground. Like, there's no kind of magic bullet here. It's kind of just doing the legwork. So, for example, myself and my team were just on the back of a 9-week kind of world tour. Gone are the days where you can just land in Palo Alto and you're going to find the next hot startup, right? It can come from anywhere in the world now. And so just taking the time to really be in market has been key to us finding innovation.
And Rahul, when you think about sourcing companies and looking at sort of technologies, how do you do it? What sort of platforms are you engaging with? Do you work with certain accelerators? What are you looking for? Or how do you look,
we do work with a number of partners, but we've also got our own platform, which we call the Unilever Foundry, which is primarily the place where we engage with the startups. And to the earlier question, I think there are 2 distinct reasons why we think it's exciting to work with startups. The first, of course, is because many of them are solving real problems and addressing real issues, and that's exciting. But I think equally, our engagement with the startups has also helped us to infuse a culture of innovation, a culture of enterprise, culture of moving fast and experimenting within the company. So it's a fairly broad sort of an exchange, and we use the Foundry to be able to actually commission projects along with the startups.
Yeah. And at Aviva, Nico, you have a sort of similar but different role in that you're sort of insourcing innovation as well as looking for startups outside of that. Can you talk a little bit about how that model works there?
Yes. So what we're trying to do is essentially replicate how a startup would behave within a very large organization. So we sit on the side with the digital garage, and my team is looking at very disruptive innovation, and we may or may not partner with the startup, but what we're trying to replicate is very much what the lean startup process is all about. So experimenting, being able to actually put options and ideas in front of the public, see what kind of feedback, iterate, pivot, and so on, with as much as possible limited budget to really try to get closer to the customer and replicate this experience and avoid the usual large corporation issues when it comes to innovation.
If we could, I'd love to have everyone just sort of go down the row and list maybe 2 startups or 2 engagements with startups that you've had or you've seen from, I know, Delu, you're pretty new in the role over there, but that you've seen that have been transformational to your brands or to the company. And Delu, if you wouldn't mind starting, and then we'll just take it down the road.
Sure. We work on with a number of different startups in different phases, right? So rather than focus on any specifics, again, I'll talk more about some of the things that we've seen in terms of the space, the types. Everything from new content types, new engagement components, I mentioned Internet of Things, delivery, all really different components of the customer experience. So there's not really one or two areas that we focus on. There's several. And we've also done things you may have seen at South by Southwest or Launch Festival this year, where we did work with specific things around VR, VR Lite. And you might think of those as new platforms or maybe not startups, but they're new opportunities to create experiences around, again, convenience and fun, and have this balanced portfolio view about our business. So those things are really sort of new entrants into the space. And so we think about all of those from an innovation and startup perspective.
Does McDonald's have a venture arm? Is there like a corporate venture arm for McDonald's?
We actually have a business development team, and that team is based in Silicon Valley in San Francisco. And we actually have a team that specifically engages with startups at different phases. But we focus again on all of those topics. And there's a specific leader of that office for us as part of our digital innovation team.
And Nico, I know the Digital Garage is also a pretty new initiative over at Aviva. But when you think about some of the things that y'all have identified already as innovations, what sorts of things have y'all prioritized, or where is the initiative sort of driven forward or parked in your Digital Garage?
We try to look at many things, and so obviously the customer experience is one thing, but we actually go further and look at new businesses and actually how you shape the insurance product itself. Like what is the customer expecting as the product? How do you integrate the product in an ecosystem as opposed to just the insurance actually pushing the product? What would the customer want? And we try to use obviously more recent technology like AI and so on to try to personalize and tailor as much as possible the product and the experience to the customer. So if they have a specific need, then they can come up and buy whatever they need, as opposed to do front-load marketing and try to push them product. So yeah, we are looking at AI, we are looking at bots. We're actually testing a lot of different channels. We are trying to, and I think that's a challenge that everybody's having, and that's what I heard on all the panel, is how do you relate to the customer through a specific channel for a very specific action. So some customer will use Messenger, for instance, to do something specific, support, ask a few questions, but then they will use an app to actually buy, and something else to do something else. So it's really identifying through, again, this iteration through the startup process, really understanding, okay, this is our audience, this is how we can target them with this specific channel, and this is the kind of product or expectation they have on this channel. And we're really learning, obviously, the insurers as an industry is a little bit behind, obviously, on that front. So we are trying to catch up as well.
Ali, Ali, when you think about Twitter, can you identify a couple of acquisitions that have been transformational? And you were also at Facebook before, so are there any acquisitions there that you see, or you see startups really transforming by their incorporation into the different companies?
Yeah, sure. So I think that the immediate one that springs to mind for me is a few years ago, Twitter acquired Crashlytics, which is a tool for developers, which really became the bedrock of our new developer platform, which is called Fabric. And it was a small team, young company, but it really kind of added new lifeblood to Twitter's engineering stack, and it kind of kicked off this new initiative, which has now been going gangbusters. Like, we recently announced that we're live on 2 billion devices, and in just over 2 years of development, that's pretty astonishing. So, so I think it's, and it wasn't acquired for all that much money. It was just a strategic acquisition made at the right time and fostered in the right way.
And Rahul, what about at Unilever? Have you seen any acquisition that's been transformational there?
So the way I look at it is, for large companies in particular, it's too early for startups to have transformed, because we serve, for instance, in Unilever, 2 billion people on the planet every day, a massive company. So transformation would not be the right word to use in the context of startups. But we've had great success in a number of projects. And the way we look at it is to think of it as to start small,
Right.
to act fast,
Right.
and to think big.
Right.
And if it sort of ticks these three boxes where we're able to quickly move with something, we see that there is potential and we're able to ramp it up with our capability across the globe, that's very useful. We also have an arm which we call the Unilever Ventures, where we invest in a number of startups as an investment, and that pretty much our engagement with startups at early stage helps us to identify those companies we might want to invest in in a serious way. But I think the most important part is if it is going to be engaging for the consumers, is going to solve real problems, then it's really exciting for us.
Now, I understand and I appreciate that, but I'd like to be able to drill down into that a little bit, and I feel like y'all have been talking kind of broadly and in very broad strokes about what it is that y'all are looking for, in part because the companies are, in fact, so big, right? I mean, all of y'all are dealing with massive industries, but if you were to sort of identify areas where you're looking for innovative new ideas or new companies,
sure.
what would they be?
Yeah, I mean, I give you a couple of examples which have been, which just to sort of elaborate on that point. So we know that there is definitely, mobile consumption and usage of mobile is very big, but it means different things in different parts of the world. So as an example, a few years back, Africa was primarily an SMS-driven, feature phone-driven, simple handset market. And what we therefore decided to do there was to actually engage with a number of companies which could make it exciting for consumers to receive different offers, different kind of communication messages on the mobile. So as an example, one of the projects we did on Knorr, which is our food product, food brand, was about people texting ingredients which they have either in their refrigerator at home, and through artificial intelligence and making sure that we capture the data right, a machine would send back a recipe on an SMS. Now that is innovative because it fits the purpose of the market, which it's quite easy to do in the smartphone world, in a manner of speaking. Similarly, another example of a company which we work very closely with, a company called Brandtone, which primarily addresses developing and emerging markets, and what you could argue is the bottom or the middle of the pyramid, and makes it worthwhile for brands to communicate and re-engage with customers. So I think the big theme for me over there is that it's not just about the glitzy toys or the cool technologies. We have a philosophy in our marketing which we deploy, which is we call it crafting brands for life, but it starts with putting people first, building brand love, and then unlocking the magic. And our engagement with startups helps us to do at least one of these three things at any point in time. And if it doesn't, then it's okay. I mean, they're just nice startups, but not of interest to us.
Yeah, right. If it's not germane to the business, then
That's
it's not
right.
germane to the business. Ali, when you think about what Twitter would look for in a startup partner or an acquisition, what criteria spring to mind? What does a company need to have before they become a viable partner for a company like yours? And I'd like to, again, sort of not to be boring about this, but go down the road, because I think that's actually a good question.
Sure. It's a good question. It's a broad question. And I think that in a lot of the examples I can think of, there was something that was specific and niche to that one business that you can't really draw a broad conclusion from. But I think generally it's a combination of strategic importance. So it's in some area of the business or some technology or something that we see on the horizon. Like Periscope's a great example, right? This is the year of live video. It's clearly this big thing. It naturally fit into Twitter's kind of ethos about being live, being public, being up to the minute. So it just makes sense from a kind of a strategic point of view. Then there's a technical kind of question, like, does this fit into our stack? Can we onboard this easily? And then honestly, a lot of it comes down to just a personal relationship. Like, do we like these people? Can we work with these people? And that's true regardless of what we're talking about. So a combination of things. I think it depends on the specifics of the company we're talking about. Yeah.
All right, and Nico, for you?
Yeah, similarly. I mean, in Aviva, you have the VC arm as well. So we do investment in startups post-Series A that we might leverage as part of the innovation team. But usually we work with earlier stage startup. And yeah, we'll be looking at startups who have access to a specific demographic we are seeking. We have access to technology or product or platform that would actually fit with something we identified as being part of the customer need. Obviously, a great team of founder, make sure they actually have a a good track record, or we actually trust them, which I think is important. We are not yet at a stage where we want to kind of make sure they use the same technology and so on. Might come, but right now we kind of are open to whatever technology they're using. Yeah, and I think that these are the key positions. That's for the innovation.
I mean, do you need to see a company have a certain scale before you can work with them?
Yes.
And I guess,
so,
Delu, that's also a
that's a
question
very
for
good
you.
point. So we actually focus more on the startup who have some kind of traction, so they're post MVPs, because that's where we can actually help them the most.
Right.
We talk to a lot of startups, we mentor startups who are more at the ideation stage, seed round, but to actually be a good partner to co-create, to pilot with them, we definitely seek more the ones that are post MVP with some metrics around engagement in that shape or form.
And Delu, for y'all, sort of the same question, but could you ever envision a time when McDonald's, I don't know why, Microsoft, yikes, McDonald's would like reach down and acquire a startup that that's pre-launched, something like the Periscope example. Would y'all ever do that? Never say never.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Specifically, I don't have any specific examples in that case. I would say, that there are, right now we try to be focused a little bit, and I'd say it's not super focused on the concept of convenience because it's being defined and redefined so considerably. But again, we try to focus it on those types of things, and obviously that's kind of a broad topic, but you've seen things on mobility, and what's the definition of mobility? You see things in store and outside of store, and you see the merging of sort of the physical and digital. So we look at categories in startups that are working across the spectrum, from small, medium, large, again, at different phases of development. Because again, what does scale mean and when does scale required varies for us across those. But again, when you look at a business of our size, it could be in a market, it could go multiple markets, it could, obviously again, when you're scaling across 36,000 restaurants, there are probably few that you can start and look at immediately and say it's going to have that scalability, right? So.
And Rahul, back to you for a second. When you are looking at these companies or looking for these companies, what have you found are the best ways to source? Like how do you find these new, young, innovative companies? Is it word of mouth? Is it by reading TechCrunch? I mean, of course, it's by reading TechCrunch. But other than by reading TechCrunch, what else are you doing?
I was waiting for that plug.
Yeah, I got to throw it in there.
No, for sure it started by working with specific companies. So for example, we work with the hub in Singapore. We'd work with different kind of people who, let's for the sake of simplicity call them scouting agents or scouts, whose job is to create a bridge between big corporations and the startup community. So for sure work with them. But over a period of time, it is more about us going outside and opening our doors for the startups to come in. So just as an example, at this very event, we have about close to 50 marketers who are attending this event between yesterday and today.
Right.
And that in our, if you went back 2-3 years, you'd probably find 1 or 2 people, who are sort of the evangelists within the company. So we are really going out, reaching out in a number of ways. For sure, a large part of it, I think it's very easy to find a large number of people at the top of the funnel.
Right.
It's only as you begin to start evaluating and looking at feasibility and the scale and what's the importance, can we really engage, that it becomes more challenging, it becomes incredibly time consuming, because for a tech startup, that project is his or her life.
Right.
And therefore they want all the time in the world from you, and it's rightly so. I mean, one gets that. But then there are so many of them. So that process of filtering is what I personally find most challenging.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it's about prioritization and sort of placing your bets in a manner of speaking on the right startup. So that I find is incredibly challenging. That said, we're finding our own ways to get through and navigate that as well.
Have you all found that accelerators are a good are actually sort of good at vetting this for you? I mean, a number of y'all mentioned that you work with Techstars.
Yeah.
If you were to rank sort of your top 3 funnels for sourcing, Ali, if you would do it, and then we'll go down the row.
I'm not sure I want to rank because
Oh, come on.
I've got to be British and, you know. But no, absolutely, generally speaking, yes, accelerators are one of the best forms of doing that because they provide that low-pass filter, that, you know, that first kind of round of sanity checking, like these ideas. So when we at Twitter think about working with startups, it's from two sides. One is the potential for acquisition, but we also have this developer platform, right? And that helps us grow Twitter, helps us grow our reach, you know, the reach of tweets, and the other tools we have, MoPub, etc. So we deal with startups in a more light touch kind of way. And so in that instance, we have this huge problem of signal versus noise.
Right.
So it's absolutely why we have you know, deep partnerships with people like Techstars, other accelerators around the world, because we need some guidance there. We don't have the people, we don't have the time to go through thousands and thousands of startups. So yeah, it works really well for us.
And Nico, a lot of what you do is internal and sort of bubbling, surfacing ideas. How do you determine which one's good? Like, where do you prioritize?
So we do both as well. So we have, you know, a lot of ideas that are coming from the innovation team, which is mostly made of entrepreneurs. And then we work with startups as well. We run hackathons to try to get some ideas, meet some startups. Actually, back to your question about prioritizing, I think it depends as well on the country. Like in London, for instance, the scene is really, really large, so it's really hard for a company to actually filter and find the right ones. So in this market, we'll try to actually partner with accelerators to get access, and sometimes exclusive access to startups. Whereas in Singapore, which is a much smaller market, it's way easier to actually get access to startup, going to events, organizing events. You always see the same startups. There are a few publications that are covering very well what's happening, so you can actually start from there and engage with them and
Delu, what about you?
Yeah, for us, actually, one of our best sources is actually our internal team. So in the process of our transformation, we've actually hired, trying to create the startup mentality and environment in our company, we've actually hired a number of really strong people from the space. And actually, they provide a lot of really good introductions and capabilities to us, and it's part of our business development team in Silicon Valley. So they're actually one of our best sources, and obviously they're working with those different accelerators, venture funds, et cetera, to identify those. But actually, they've largely come from the space and continue to use that network to provide a tremendous amount of insights for us. So.
You know, if I were to just add to a slightly different dimension, and that may be for interest for many people, most of the startups I engage with, you know, if it is difficult for brands to find where startups are, it is even more difficult for the startups to actually engage with the brands, because they, quite frankly, very often they have great idea, great products, but really don't know, you know, where to access the brands. And so there is definitely, I think, in the larger industry, a need, whether we call it some sort of a bridge, I don't know what that platform might be, and I think this festival serves that purpose to some extent, of actually enabling, you know, those kind of conversations to take place. Because if you're a young startup, you have a great idea, you quite frankly don't even know where to start with any big company.
Well, I mean, it's so overwhelming for entrepreneurs who are just starting out because you're running at so many different vectors, right? I mean, like, you have to build a business, you have to staff up, you have to do all of these things, and then on top of that, you have to find the right partner that will fit with the types of things that y'all are doing. It's tricky.
So I want to say something which I was shooting myself in the foot, but one of the principles I've followed for the last couple of years is I never say no to any startup for a meeting.
Really?
Right? And
you should not advertise.
I know, exactly.
No, but should totally advertise.
Because you know, but I shouldn't be advertising it because that's like a, you know, prescription. But you know, at Rahul Welde, one way or another on Twitter at Rahul Welde. So you know, we get a second plug in there. Make sure that, you know, you guys have a lot of Lipton tea as well. But the bottom line is that, you know, I'm really curious and I'm really keen to engage because I know what the problems are like. Some of the startups I've been engaged with where I mentor or I'm advisor, I can see that there's so much of potential. So that is why the open access, not, you know, just for the sake of it, because there's always something that comes out of it.
I mean, I personally, I'm the same way. I have to be, right? Like, if I'm not meeting with every startup, then I'm doing something wrong. Anyone who wants to talk to me should be able to talk to me because I also, ideally, am providing somewhat of a filter for y'all, and I can even, and often do, like, slide companies to different corporations if I feel like there's a good fit there. It's one of the things that I think we should do to improve sort of the community engagement. There's so many things that we could talk about. I want to get to one of the questions, though, that people seem to be really interested in, which is the, it's not showing up. I'm very bad at technology for a tech editor. As a startup, what can we do, or what can a startup do to make a strong brand to consumers? Y'all are all very large, very successful, big brands that are globally identifiable. How can a startup get there? What do they need to focus on? I know this is sort of left field for y'all, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Like, what do you think a startup should be doing to brand itself?
Yeah, I think so. There are two phases of that marketing journey for any startup. The first of which is customer acquisition or consumer acquisition, whatever is the platform or the product. And it's really important to get scale right. That's the first part. In my experience, many people succeed in that. But the real crucial part is the re-engagement, the repurchase, and making sure that there's loyalty, advocacy built around your platform. Because acquiring consumers and getting people is easy, but to make sure that they keep coming back. Because if they keep coming back, then there is nothing better for a brand than having repeat purchase or loyalty.
Being successful, basically, is the way that you build
but that's
a brand.
exactly
It's
right.
like sort
Being
of tautological,
successful. Yeah, but you can, so a lot of companies you hear about are successful because the ramp up is steep and they get the scale.
Right.
And then it doesn't necessarily drop off, but it kind of plateaus, it slows down, whatever word you want to use. And that is because people are not coming back.
Right.
And in the startup world, in the tech world, it's called churn, etc., and people dropping off. But churn is bad.
Right.
Churn is not acceptable because churn really means that somebody came in and then went away. And if there are lots of people coming in and lots of people are going out, that's not good for the brand. So my simple answer to building a brand is have lots of people and have them engage in lots of ways, depending on what it is.
I would tend to agree. I think that ultimately engagement is key.
Right.
And you typically find in most products that there's some inflection point where the product gets good enough that people come back of their own accord, and therefore it becomes like a flywheel. Like a classic example is the Facebook one, which I think has been talked about loads, which is, I think the number was 23 friends. Like before you get 23 friends on Facebook, there's not enough kind of nascent content like coming through your newsfeed that encourages you to come back.
Right.
But the moment you get there, then suddenly it becomes this thing that you want to go back to every day. And so if you open a new Facebook account today, you'll see that it's all engineered to get you to that magic number because then you come back. And so I think that ultimately, it comes down to products. Like, you need to solve product first. You need to get to the point where you have loyal users. And at that point, then you can start thinking about maybe slightly secondary concerns, like building a brand.
Right.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think more than having a lot of customers, getting fewer customers to actually come more often, that's actually the best way you can design the product because you get a lot of feedback, you collect a lot of data about what the customer is using, how they're actually using the app, why they are coming back, and that's how you can actually iterate and get a better solution to provide them with. Otherwise, it's just one-shot customer, and it's really hard to shape the solution in this way. So kind of stick with a team of evangelists and early adopters and really build a product with them together and then get to scale. Really take the time to do that. A lot of people just kind of get some kind of traction and try to scale right away. You have to get this period where you nurture and you learn, and I think that's really critical.
Delu, do you have anything to add, or is that?
I think one other opportunity still for startups is also to think about the opportunity, again, to work with larger organizations or people within larger organizations to really help them understand during the right phases how to develop and how the product can still evolve. Because in some cases, the base product is good, and then when you put it into wild, you really learn a lot very quickly. You can really understand how the product can go from good to great. So I think those are really big opportunities.
So I'm going to ask, a question. Y'all don't have to answer it, but I hope you will. There are a lot of startups that have come in and sort of challenged all of y'all's businesses at their core. And if you were to think about one startup company who you'd like to emulate in terms of their messaging or their branding or the way that they're presenting themselves, who would that be? Sorry, I got to throw one in there, guys. Come on. Like, for you, it'd be like Honest Company. It would be one that comes to mind for me, for y'all, right? I mean, they're doing consumer product goods, and they have this message that they're, cleaner and greener and healthier and better for people. But like, do you see something like that come up and say, okay, we want to take that kind of identity or approach, or is that not really a concern or an issue?
No, that's the reality is in the consumer goods space there are a number of different companies. They're not necessarily tech startups because ours is largely a product
venture-backed
company.
or whatever,
But venture-backed great companies across the world which have been challenging So Dollar Shave Club in the US is a great example of successful, real big scale. Didn't challenge us, but nevertheless, is a very, very big player now. There's Frank Body in Australia, which is a great beauty company, created primarily on the back of Instagram, not even broad platforms, but just Instagram. Beautiful visuals, great products. Yeah. So there are a number of these companies which are taking place. But I think to your question, the way I look at it is, indeed the disruption is larger in the technology space, right. And you could argue less in, traditional marketing or big product companies such as us. But in the communication space, which is a very important part of marketing for us, right. There is a lot of disruption which is taking place. And to that extent, I would say that the holy notions and lots of different things which we held very close from a communication and a marketing perspective are being challenged.
Okay. What about at Twitter? Can you think of an example?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just trying to rack my brain. I mean, there's not so much in terms of just pure startups, but established companies. But I mean, there's been lots of conversation today about taking lessons from networks in the East, right? Like what Line have done, what WeChat have done, through commerce, through bots, through stickers, these kinds of things. I think there's a lot that we can learn from that kind of thing, and we continue to do that. In terms of like marketing and branding, I'm not so sure. I feel like Twitter kind of has quite an iconic place in the world. Yeah. And I feel like the thing we should do is double down on that rather than try and emulate too much else.
What about
I mean, the insurance world is still very new. InsurTech is really just popping up. We don't have so many startups that we can kind of compare with. I mean, the one that I think about is more on the marketing and communication, oddly, is more like Lemonade. So they haven't even done anything. Nobody knows what they do, but everybody's excited about it, and it's insurance. So I think it's a good way of saying, all right, there is actually a way of getting people somewhat curious, interested in what you're doing, even though it's insurance, and a lot of people are like considering insurance to be a dead topic. So I guess there's some learnings out of that.
Delu?
Not a specific one that we're trying to emulate. Obviously, when we look at our scale and size, there's a number of them. So we're looking across a number of different components and capabilities. Not specifically trying to emulate any one, but taking little components from lots of different. So yeah.
Well, there's so many more questions I could ask, but I think we are actually out of time, unfortunately. I'd like to thank my panelists for an amazing and engaging discussion. It's really great to have y'all on stage. I very much appreciate it. I'm sure these fellas do too. Y'all can all reach out to Rahul, especially, anytime you want. His inbox is always open, and you can have a meeting with him whenever. But thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. I know it's the end of the day, but y'all have been great. Thank you.
Thanks.